Well, the Norwegian envoy in South Sudan has released very harsh statements regarding the political and security crisis right now in South Sudan. According to the Norway envoy, Dr. Riek Machar has to be released for the South Sudan peace agreement to work. That is a non-negotiable. And they have also said that for Norway to support South Sudan elections, they need to see efforts from the country. And that is not all. They have said that elections must be held in 2026. Well, that is a story that I'm going to tell you more about what the Norway envoy said regarding South Sudan, the current crisis in South Sudan, and what it exactly means and what Norway has provided for South Sudan thus far. Well, this is Bonafide. If you haven't subscribed, kindly subscribe and hit that notification button so that when I release something new on the South Sudan crisis, you get notified as soon as possible. Well, His Excellency Roh Hagstol, the Norwegian envoy to South Sudan, has said that Norway agrees with the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres' assessment that the South Sudan peace deal is in total shambles. He has said that while we know the situation right now in South Sudan, to put you up to speed in that situation, the first vice president of South Sudan is still under house arrest. We're talking about 1 month plus weeks that the South Sudanese first vice president, Riek Machar, has been under house arrest. Top leaders of the SPLA-IO, the opposition forces military wing, are also under house arrest, and many dignitaries that have been representing the opposition in South Sudan are also under house arrest. No envoy, no peace mediator has gone into South Sudan and has reported that they have met with Dr. Riek Machar or any other dignitary in South Sudan. The Western countries have been very, very hard against the government of the day in South Sudan, saying that Dr. Riek Machar has to be released from the house arrest and has to be given his freedom to say he's part of the story. But the South Sudanese government has been putting a halt on any kind of efforts by the African Union or IGAD to go and reach Dr. Riek Machar. Now, this is what the Norwegian envoy is getting his excerpt from, saying that as a troika, as part of the Western allies of South Sudan, they have one statement that Dr. Riek Machar has to be released from the house arrest. The envoy also noted that the only way out of this political deadlock and security crisis in South Sudan is if there is dialogue, and dialogue cannot be held with one party under house arrest. He went on further to say that the political crisis in South Sudan will not be solved through violence. Of course, both parties right now in South Sudan are culpable of violence that is ongoing in the country. We cannot say that it is only coming from the government of the day, but also the opposition forces, different parts of the country have been involved in violence. And this is something that the Norwegian envoy is saying that that should not happen. Remember, this is coming just days after the UN extended the arms embargo. And if you followed very closely on that voting at the United Nations Security Council, there have been lines drawn between the West and the East. Most Eastern countries, and of course, most African parties that were in the UNSC during that voting, voted that the South Sudanese government should be given permission to import weapons in the country to arm the South Sudanese People Defense Forces. But most Western countries, US, UK, France, Norway included, other countries, they have been supporting that there should be a continuation of the arms embargo in the country. But Russia and China came out to say that it is time for the South Sudanese government to be given the liberty to continue to arm its forces, because there can't be an attack at any time and the forces are not well equipped. That is the reason that has been given by Russia and China, that there should be an end to the arms embargo. But right now, what we know is that the arms embargo has been extended for another 1 year, meaning that from now up to next year, the end of May 2026, there will still be an arms embargo from the UN to the South Sudanese government, if at all nothing changes. One of the solutions that has been given by different parties in going out of this political crisis in South Sudan is to have a general elections in the country. Well, these general elections were to be held last year in December. But up to right now, we've not had any elections in South Sudan. They have been postponed about 3 times. And right now, there is a set date for the elections in 2026. Now, the Norwegian envoy is saying that this is the last chance for South Sudan to redeem its glory and that elections must be held in 2026. And on that, he says that according to experts in elections in the country, they've said that they need at least 18 months to prepare for these elections. Right now, to that date that has been set by the South Sudanese government, we have 19 months. And to that envoy, he's saying that this now is the time for the South Sudanese government to start voter registration, to start preparation for the elections, so that the elections will really be held in 2026 and that there is no room for another postponement of the elections. And the envoy was very clear when it comes to elections because it seems as if the South Sudanese government will need assistance from other countries, other partners to hold these elections. The Norwegian envoy came out to say that Norway will not be part of any kind of progress towards anything if there are no efforts by the government of the day to make things right, meaning that the peace agreement has to be adhered to. There have to be a start of preparations to have elections in 2026. That is when the Norwegian envoy will come in to start assisting South Sudan in making the elections a reality. But one will ask, why is the Norwegian envoy coming out this strong against South Sudan? Yet we know that South Sudan is a sovereign state, and of course, it has the abilities to conduct any preparations that it wants because it can make its own decision. Well, when asked what Norway has provided for South Sudan thus far, the envoy pointed out that in 2023, Norway provided close to 100 million US dollars in humanitarian and other support in South Sudan, as well as from 2018 to 2024. Norway provided close to 600 million US dollars in support to the people of South Sudan. Perhaps that is the reason as to why the envoy is coming out very strongly, giving this very harsh statement against the South Sudanese government, against the positions that have been held by the South Sudanese government. The South Sudanese government has come out to say that it really has to do these investigations, that these investigations on Riek Machar and other leaders of the opposition have to be concluded for them to see the day of light. But the Norwegian envoy is coming out to say that, one, Dr. Riek Machar, as a principal to the peace agreement, has to be released before anything goes on in South Sudan. And two, he's saying that for there to be any kind of assistance from Norway henceforth, there have to be efforts by the South Sudanese government in terms of preparing for the elections in 2026. Well, I will keep you updated and informed of the latest of what is happening in South Sudan regarding this crisis. Keep it bona fide.